up in a very conservative home, very strict home. And Diane was described by a lot of people as boy crazy and was always looking for the next person to date. And this directly went against her parents' rules. But she did it anyway. And eventually she started dating this 16-year-old boy who lived pretty close to her. And his name was Steve Downs. But after graduation, they went separate ways. Steve ended up joining the Navy, and Diane went to the Pacific Coast Baptist Bible College in Oregon, California. But the two of them were really in love. He promised to be faithful to her, and she promised that she would be faithful to him back. But that did not last very long, and as soon as they were separated, Diane started hooking up with several different guys, and she also started getting in trouble a lot at school. And after a year, she was expelled for promiscuous behavior. So the two of them decided to get back together and run away together. And they decided to go ahead and get married on November 13th, 1973. People who were around them said that they fought all the time, especially about finances and about the possibility of Diane cheating again. And to make matters even more dicey, they ended up having a child in 1974. Her name was Christy Ann. And then just 6 months after Christy was born, Diane left her and went and joined the Navy. So Steve had to take care of their baby by himself. Diane only made it through 3 weeks of training before coming home because of severe blisters. So eventually they have another child in 1976. And after Cheryl was born, Steve decided to have a vasectomy. And a few years later, they moved to Mesa, Arizona. And it wasn't long until Diane met some new coworkers and Diane got pregnant once again. So you might be wondering how that happened. Diane had an affair. She decided to go through with the pregnancy and she gave birth to a baby boy in 1979 and his name was Stephen Daniel. She became a mom for all the wrong reasons. She did not actually care about being a mom whatsoever. It was a way to manipulate situations. And even though Diane was sleeping with other men, Steve continued to stay with her, mainly for the sake of their kids. But this did not last, and they ended up getting divorced in 1980. Of course, after Steve finally left her, Diane felt an increased pressure to take care of her kids, to provide for them. And pregnancy seemed to be something she was good at. So she decided to become a surrogate. And of course, you can't just become a surrogate, thankfully. You do have to pass some evaluations. Diane ended up failing 2 of the psychiatric exams. One actually noted that she was psychotic, but she was still accepted as a surrogate. In 1982, she gave birth to a little girl named Jennifer and was paid $10,000 for that. Meanwhile, she was dating a coworker who was named Robert Nickenbacker. He also went by Nick, and she said that he was the love of her life, but he said that the relationship was very intense, so eventually he broke it off. And one of the reasons why he broke it off was because he did not like kids in general, didn't really like her kids, but Diane was absolutely devastated. And it really made her feel angry at her kids. She felt like she lost the man of her dreams because of them. And Diane started to resent her own children. When Diane was 27 years old, she moved with her kids to Cottage Grove, Oregon, and took a job at the post office there. But even after Diane moved there, she was still obsessed with Robert and was obsessively writing him letters. One time she even visited him in 1983, but he made it clear when they were in person that it was over. And you might be wondering where her kids would be when she was out working or with men. Most of the time they were with her parents, but some of the time they were with their fathers. But oftentimes they were just left home alone. And the 6-year-old Christy was left in charge of watching the other younger kids. And when Cheryl was 6 or 7 years old, she actually told one of their neighbors that she was afraid to be around Diane. And it was an absolutely toxic situation. That brings me to Thursday, May 19th, 1983. Diane and her kids had just gotten done visiting a friend's house and they stayed pretty late. I mean, the kids were fairly young. Cheryl was sitting up front with Diane and the other 2 kids were sitting in the back seat. Diane decides to go on the scenic route home. And all the kids, according to her, were asleep in the car at that point. So Diane and her kids are driving down this rural road near Springfield, Oregon, when all of a sudden she sees this man standing in the road and he's like flagging her down. It was about 10 p.m. at this point, but that did not stop Diane from pulling over for this strange man in the middle of nowhere with a car full of kids. So she decided to get out and talk to this bushy-haired stranger. That's how Diane described this guy. And he automatically demands her car keys. And he shoots her in the left arm. Then Diane throws her car keys in a bush. The guy believes that they're in the bush, but she actually still has them on her. So she runs over to the car, the guy's over at the bush, and she has just enough time to jump in the car and take off with all 3 of the kids who were lying in the back and had been shot. Then she says she starts driving wildly to the hospital. But that's actually not the case. Finally, Diane gets to the hospital, and by the time she gets there, Cheryl is unfortunately already dead. The others were in horrible condition. Diane's injury was, of course, the least serious injury. She had just been shot in her arm. The whole hospital staff was just shocked, and they expected the mother of these children to be just devastated when they interviewed her. But she had no emotion. She did not seem upset at all. Another thing they noticed is that Diane had a towel wrapped around her own wound, but she had not attempted to wrap any type of towel around her children's wounds. And she seemed way more concerned about the fact that her car, her new car, had blood on it in the current condition of her children. And when she was told that Cheryl was dead, she accepted it right away. In fact, she seemed relieved. Then they told her that Danny was hit in the spine and was paralyzed, and her response wasn't any type of concern, it was shock that he wasn't hit in the heart. However, Christy was still alive. She had had a stroke though, so she was in and out of consciousness and unable to communicate at all. So that means the only witness was Diane. The police had mixed feelings on her from the start, but they decided to go out and search the area where she said all of this happened and tried to look for this bushy-haired man. And all that they found was a few bullet casings on the ground. And as far as what the police knew at this point, from what Diane had told them, she had hopped right in the car after tricking this guy and drove straight to the hospital as fast as she can, that she drove like a lunatic. But in reality, like I mentioned, she was driving really slow. And the police actually found out about this by interviewing a witness who was driving behind Diane on the way to the hospital. And this guy that was driving behind her said that she was driving so slow and he ended up having to just drive around her. So the police tried to understand a little better how the night unfolded, and they decided to have Diane actually act out what happened. And this to me is one of the scariest clips in true crime. Honestly, the way that she acts really freaks me out. Diane looks like she was having fun. You can even see her kind of primping her hair, getting ready before they start to roll the camera. I mean, most mothers in this situation would barely be able to function and talk. Towards the end of that, you see she bangs her arm, and investigators to this day believe that she was gonna say, "That was worse than when I shot myself."
This is worse than, okay.
And of course, seeing Diane's mood and behavior in this reenactment, police felt like she definitely did something here. There was a lot of red flags, but they didn't have the evidence that Diane had done it yet. So Diane continued living her life as normal and started doing some more TV interviews. And in these interviews, she doesn't even try to seem emotional at all. Sometimes she even had a disgusting like smirk when she was speaking, as if she was kind of getting off on what she was saying and reliving it in her head. And people started to be more vocal about this, and Diane did not like the criticism. And then it came out that police had actually searched Diane's car and they found blood on her passenger side door, which does not make sense with her story. She said that this man had shot her kids on the driver's side of the car. So how did this blood get there? The victims had been shot with .22 caliber bullets, but Diane denied even owning a handgun. However, the police had talked to Steve and he confirmed that Diane did own a handgun. And when police searched her house, they found a rifle and bullet cartridges that had been tampered with. The extraction marks on the bullets were unique though, and they matched the casings that were found at the crime scene. But they also confiscated Diane's diaries, and they read several entries about that guy, Robert, that Diane was really obsessed with, the guy who broke her heart. She talks about how Robert didn't want to have kids and how sad it was making her. She also wrote some poems about him. One of them said, "I love you more than could your wife, yet it's brought sorrow to my life. I just keep hoping and hanging on. How much longer can I be strong?" So they started to feel like maybe it was possible that Diane got rid of her kids because she felt like they were holding her back from finding love. And of course, during this whole time, Diane continues to blab on to the media. She really thought that everyone was believing everything that she said, but public support is really starting to shift. Eventually, after finding some more evidence, detectives brought Diane back in for some more questioning. They did a 2-hour interrogation with her, and during this time, Diane changed her story several times. Diane's one of those people who lies so much that she can't keep track of her lies, and they start to get twisted. At first, she started telling them that there were actually 2 attackers, and that one of them at least knew her by name and knew about her tattoo. Then she starts claiming that she knew the person, and when police pushed her to try to get a name out of her, she got really mad and ended up storming out of the room. By this time, people were completely over Diane. I mean, no one was really believing her, and people wanted her to be held accountable. And the police wanted to arrest her too, but they needed a little bit more evidence, and the one thing that they wanted to do was talk to Christy. Now, they knew that Christy had to be extremely emotionally traumatized after being in that car ride and seeing her siblings get shot, potentially by her own mother. So they decided it was best that she start by working with a therapist. So she did, and the therapist starts having her write down the name of who hurt her that night and then throw it into a fire. And hopefully one day she won't want to burn it, was the idea. She did this over and over again, and eventually she was comfortable enough to let the therapist read the piece of paper. And on the piece of paper that she gave her therapist, she wrote down, "My mom." So 9 months after the shooting took place, Diane was arrested on February 28th, 1984. And she was back in the spotlight again. And Diane seemed to really enjoy the renewed media attention. She would smile for cameras like none of it really mattered to her. She acted so lighthearted about it all. Diane was charged with 1 count of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder and criminal assault. And by the time the trial started on May 10th, 1984, Diane was noticeably pregnant. Yep, that's right, Diane was pregnant once again. It was clear that Diane was using pregnancy to get something that she wanted, and this time it was sympathy. Maybe Diane thought she would get better treatment in jail or have a better outcome on her case if she was pregnant.
Children are so easy to conceive.
And going into trial, Diane seemed very confident that she was going to get away with this. And the way that she was acting in the courtroom was just as bizarre as her media interviews. They also made the very difficult decision to have Christy actually testify, but it was vitally important. They were worried that Christy may not be able to handle it, testifying with her mother in the room against her, and they just had no idea how she would handle all of that pressure. But she did a really good job. She told the court that she remembered her mom stopping the car, getting out, and going back to the trunk to get something out. And she recalled her mother leaning into the car and shooting Cheryl first. Then she leaned over the back seat and shot Danny, and then reached over and shot her as well. Then she said she watched Diane shoot herself, wrap a towel around her arm, and get back in the car and start driving slowly towards the hospital. Diane was guilty. After she was found guilty, Diane still tried to convince people that she was innocent. In fact, she still tries to claim that she's innocent to this day. But before she was even sentenced, she gave birth to a baby girl who was named Amy Elizabeth, and she was adopted and renamed Rebecca. Around this time, Diane was also examined by psychiatrists, and she was diagnosed with being narcissistic and had antisocial personality disorders. So then in July of 1987, Diane decided to try and escape prison. She was out in the exercise yard getting some fresh air when she decided to execute her plan. And Diane is considered to be a very dangerous person. People were really worried at the time that she could possibly go after Christy. And they didn't find any clues about where she possibly could have gone, any details about her escape. All they found was a clipboard with a piece of blank paper on it. So they did that classic trick where you sketch over the bottom piece and you can see what was written on the paper that was before it. And there was actually a drawing with a map and an address. So they went there, and it turns out Diane had been hiding there the entire time. After this, Diane was transferred to a maximum security prison in New Jersey. Her youngest daughter, who was now named Becky and had been adopted, was living a really good childhood, thankfully. But as she got older, Becky felt totally lost. I mean, she was scared that she had come from this woman, scared that she could have ended up with her. And with all the stress, she ended up turning to drugs. She dropped out of school and she ran away from her parents' house. After that, she wanted to reach out to Diane. She ended up writing her letters in prison. And surprisingly, Diane actually got back to her. And the first thing that she said to her in the letters was, "Wow, you look just like me. Don't you hate that chin we have?" After some time and some self-healing, Becky came to the conclusion that just because she was biologically related to Diane, that didn't mean that she had to be anything like her. She worked really hard and ended up getting her life together and was a really great mom to her son Chris after all. She got a degree in psychology and ended up working as a behavioral health coordinator for children. And there was also somewhat of a happy ending for Diane's other two children, Christy and Danny. They were actually both adopted by one of the prosecutors in this case, Fred Hughey. Danny tragically was paralyzed from the waist down, and Christy also has a speech impediment. They now live a very quiet and peaceful life with their families, and they stay out of the media. I think Diane should definitely be up there with some of the most evil women of all time. I mean, she is cold to the core. Like, she has no ounce of empathy in her soul at all. Diane still claims that she's innocent to this day. I will see you guys in my next video, but until then, stay safe out there.